Okay. Hey, we are continuing our ecology, but kind of branching off a little bit to focus on plants here today and the next few days. Um, Plants, like I say, I want to spend some time talking about them because they get overlooked a lot of times in high school biology. It's easy to kind of skip over them, and ultimately you go your career without learning anything about plants. And we're surrounded by plants, and so I always think it's helpful to have a little bit of a background on what we're looking at. Also, I think they're really fascinating. So botany is the study of plants. So if you take a botany class, you're going to be focusing primarily on plant, or only on plants, really. And I did take a botany class in college. I remember signing up for it thinking it was going to be kind of boring because now it's just about plants. It turned out to be one of my favorite classes. And so it was, for labs, we would go out into the woods, into the fields, into the swamps, and just study and look at unique plants and identifying stuff. And so I really think it's kind of a cool, overlooked world there. Directly talking about some of the coolness, some of the most impressive organisms on Earth are trees. We take trees for granted. Um, they're fascinating. They are impressive. They make us look um, small and insignificant in a lot of ways. Here are just some of those ways. Over on the left, we have the widest trunk. So this is talking about diameter. So just one side to the other, if you could drive straight through it, is 38 feet wide. Okay, that would be wider than any two-lane road that you drive on. So it's a huge trunk. Two in the middle we have are the oldest. Okay, the one we started, this one on the right, that structure, that bristlecone pine, whoops, is the same structure that has been there for 4,800 years. Okay, so that is older than almost all the world's religions. It's older than all of our modern civilizations. We don't have too many human structures that are 5,000 years old. And that particular tree has been there for all of it. And then the oldest single clonal is over here. It's in Sweden, and that is 9,500 years old. So over almost 10,000 years old is how old that thing is. That's almost as old as agriculture and writing itself are. So impressive species that make our lifespans look almost insignificant. Then the two biggest over here are both redwoods in Northern California. We have the tallest is 30 or 380 feet tall. If you think about that, that's like a 38-story building roughly. That's taller than a lot of buildings. That's taller than a lot of buildings in downtown Minneapolis. And then the biggest here, they estimate, is 1,385 tons. So trees are impressive species. We're not going to focus on trees yet today, though. We're going to talk about the different categories of plants just to kind of do an introduction. The first up, we're going to start about talking about kind of the strange ones, the ones that you might not consider, maybe you didn't think of as plants. And those are the non-vascular plants. So it's our first category, and they're the most, I want to say simple, but yeah, they are the most simple. They don't have any vessels, they don't have any roots, no stems, no leaves, things that we always think of when we think of plants. But they have plant cells, they are photosynthesizing things. And the biggest example is moss. All right, we've all seen moss growing. It's definitely, yeah, you'd probably classify it as a plant if you had to, but it's not the first thing that you think of when you think of plants. And then liverworts here. Here's a picture of a liverwort there. And like I said, definitely some oddball plants. Next up, we have the gymnosperms. Okay, I'm gonna get everything on the slide at once here, and I'll move my picture over. So gymnosperms, think pine trees here. So pine trees are definitely a different kind of plant. That stands for naked seeds, right? So the seeds are not encased in a fruit at all. They're just seeds. Instead, they have cones. So a cone will have little seeds in there. Instead of leaves, they have needles. They typically stay green year round. They still lose needles. Look underneath any pine tree. The needles die and get replaced. They just cycle through it all year versus dropping all their leaves at once. They are pollinated by the wind Go out in the springtime sometime and shake a pine tree, and you'll see all that pollen come off of it as the wind carries it different places. So gymnosperms, think conifers are another name. You might have heard about that. And then our biggest category, where we're going to spend a lot of our time, because it's where the most plants are the angiosperms. These would be the flowering plants. So any plant that has a flower, keep in mind sometimes, science's definition of a flower is not the same thing that you would put, in a bouquet, but it is a reproductive part of the plant. The seeds are enclosed in a fruit, same thing. Think the science definition of fruit, not the supermarket definition. Most are pollinated by bees, birds, insects, some kind of organism is doing the pollinating. Most of them have finite growing seasons. We know that here in Minnesota, that in the fall, leaves are turning, they're dying, and the plants are going to go into hibernation, so to speak, for the winter. And this has a huge list. It's got grasses, it's got tulips, it's got oaks, it's got dandelions. All those things are angiosperms. Now, angiosperms are big enough that we're going to break those into two groups themselves. All right, we have the monocots and we have the eudicots or the dicots. All right, last classification here for the day. Monocots, I always think of corn. All right, everyone knows what corn looks like. Everyone's familiar with that. Its seed is just in one part. There's no half to it. It's just when that plant in the green there starts to grow, it's just going to grow up as a single entity as it's coming through. The roots and stems are less significant. One thing with the root, I don't like this diagram as much as that these monocots have these like fibrous roots. Like if you look at the base of a stalk of corn, it's not just one big taproot going down, it's these fibrous roots. Leaves, everyone's seen what, the parallel veins on the leaves of corn looks like. So they run in parallel to each other, the veins do. And then when they flower in groups of 3. And we'll get into the different flower parts and whatnot later on. The dicots are different in that. They have 2 seed leaves. So when these things grow, they're going to come out of the ground and they're going to pop open with 2 leaves. They do have a central taproot going down. So they have one big taproot and then other roots going off of that. Its leaves are not parallel. They're branching. And then its flower parts come in 4s and 5s. Here's look at some dicots here. So most plants you think of are dicots. And then the monocots, like I said, corn's a big one, grasses, tulips, etc. in there. Okay. We'll get more into these parts, but here's just a brief introduction on the different categories for plants.